The Moonwatch could easily be the most recognizable watch from Omega. It is as iconic as a watch can get. Recently, I had a chat with two friends who were never into watches, and they are now considering the Moonwatch as their first serious watch. In this video, I would like to share with you what we have discussed, which can get a little controversial and very subjective, but it will probably help you think about whether this watch is right for you. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome back to the channel. This is my Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch 3861. Let's first quickly go through the specs. It has a case diameter of 42mm, 47.5mm lug to lug, 13.2mm thick, and has water resistance of 50 meters with a push-pull crown. This is the sapphire sandwich, which means it has a nicely domed sapphire crystal, as well as a sapphire open case back. This watch weighs below 140 grams before any length adjustment, and the bracelet is nicely tapered, so overall, it wears very comfortably on the wrist, slim and lightweight as a chronograph. This is how it looks on my 6.5-inch wrist. I would say it is the most comfortable watch in my collection. The lugs and the dimensions, it just works. I've heard some say about there are sharp edges at the clasp, but I have no issues at all. I really like the look of this bracelet. It is less of a tool look than the previous generation, but I think it strikes the balance pretty well. Can't deny the polish in between links makes the watch rather dressy, but the Speedy is definitely a strap monster. Just pair it with whatever strap you like and it changes the whole character of the watch. And recently, Omega made a subtle but very welcome change to the clasp. They finally added a micro adjustment. I don't know why they didn't do it when they launched this latest generation Moonwatch back in 2021. Inside is the caliber 3861. It beats at 3Hz and has power reserve for 50 hours. It is a hand-wound chronograph and uses Omega's famous coaxial escapement to improve the longevity of the movement. This generation is the first Moonwatch to feature the coaxial escapement, besides a few limited editions, which is quite late given it was invented by George Daniel over 50 years ago. But I believe that was to stay true to the original Moonwatch that had the caliber 321. It is a META-certified movement, which means it has an accuracy between 0 to plus 5 seconds per day, anti-magnetic to 15,000 Gauss, and all that good stuff. I'm really impressed by Omega's movement in recent years. Both this and my Seamaster diver have been keeping basically perfect time, like 1 to 2 seconds per day. And they are the watches I wear when I'm literally doing different kind of sports, from swimming to cycling. Well done, Omega. I've always been intrigued by this watch since I got into the hobby. The watch that went to the moon. I guess it's fair to say that this watch has the most well-known story of any mechanical watch. I'm not going too deep in that in this video, but just a brief recap. The Speedmaster was launched in 1957 as a sports chronograph for auto racing. It was then selected by NASA in 1964 as it was the only watch that survived the test. And eventually it made its way to the moon in 1969 and served a life-saving role on Apollo 13 in 1970. So recently I have been separately asked by two friends who are not into watches, but they are looking for their first serious watch to commemorate different life stages. Before I even responded them with a million of watch ideas on my mind, coincidentally, they both said, "What about the Moonwatch?" I was kind of surprised, but not too surprised, So I asked them why, then we started our very interesting discussion, so I decided to make this video and see what you guys think about that. Starting from the very basic, they both want a watch that can be dressed up and down. Well, in fact, one of them is gonna use it as his wedding watch. But they do not want to go for a dress watch because it just doesn't suit their day-to-day lives. Then they want a watch that is subtle but instantly recognizable. That's when our discussion started to get a little interesting. Many watches can fit in that category, but why the Moonwatch in particular? To a non-watch person, there are not many watches that are instantly recognizable. I've asked them to name a few and they said they could only recognize a Rolex Daytona, an AP Royal Look, and an Omega Speedmaster. The first two are in a much higher price range, and for someone who is only getting into the watch world, that will be way out of the budget. I mean, of course, there are people who can spend that amount of money easily, but we are talking about normies. Meanwhile, there is the Moonwatch from Omega, a well-respected brand that costs only a fraction of the price of those two. Now that's a huge bargain. Of course, you can argue that AP is in a totally different tier in terms of brand status and overall finishing of the watch, but what about the Daytona? I don't want to go too deep into comparing the Moonwatch to a Daytona in this video because that would be too long, but in short, to a naked eye, it is very hard to justify the price difference between them two. I'm talking about market price, even though the Speedy is still cheaper in terms of retail. Well, in fact, when I show my two friends the caliber 3861 through the open case back, they almost didn't return me the watch. In my humble opinion, the Moonwatch has the best finished and aesthetically pleasing movement under 10,000 or even 15,000 US dollars. Nomos is another one. Hopefully I can get one in for a video in the future. So within the budget of a normie first watch buyer, the Moonwatch is the most recognizable watch. I said to a naked eye, it's hard to justify the price difference between the Speedmaster and the Daytona. So clearly there is something we can't see that sets the difference. That's the branding and simply market demand and supply. So I asked them, why don't you consider other brands like Tudor or IWC? Their response was quite funny but true, because the Moonwatch has the cooler story. Whether you like it or not, when the Speedmaster passed the test for space mission and made its way to the moon, it's destined to be that watch, even though Omega had no idea the watch was chosen at the time. But being one of the major brands of this watch group is a recipe for marketing success. So the Moonwatch sounds like a great choice so far for being recognizable and having a cool enough story to differentiate it from other watches. But what about being subtle? That's the point that got us thinking most because it's very much subjective. And they said they wanted a recognizable watch. Can a watch be both? Well, I don't really know because as a watch person, most watches are instantly recognizable to me. I mean, from a Seiko 5 to a Rolex Sub to a Lange 1, I can spot them across the room with ease. So we had to first define what's subtle, and the conclusion was not being flamboyant nor pretentious. And that's a great point because oftentimes when you are buying a watch as a reward for accomplishment or to celebrate a special moment, you don't really want a watch that shout for attention. You want one that's subtle and kind of humble, just like the hard work you put in to get in those moments. Only yourself or other like-minded understands how much it took you to get there. That's kind of what the Moonwatch does as well. It connects you with other watch people instead of showing off to everyone. Till this day, I still get the comment that says it's a poor man's Daytona. People who say that are likely to be someone who just want a watch on their wrist to flex, which is fine because it's your money and you can spend it however you like. And that doesn't bother me because I'm not trying to be in a show-off battle with them, and I'm very likely gonna lose because I'm too poor for that. And instead, a lot of time, the Moonwatch connects you with other like-minded watch nerds who have more to talk about on their watch stories instead of the market price of a watch, which I find a lot more interesting and part of what makes watch collecting enjoyable. Wait, isn't that some sort of a showing off too? Well, let me put it this way. We as a person, we don't live on our own. We live in groups and societies. One of the very first things we got taught back in school is how to communicate and how to fit in. But as we grow older, we realize we don't want to be someone who just fit in the society, do we? We want to be unique, and yet we just can't totally ignore the fact that we live with others like our colleagues and friends. So we have to find a balance. And that's what the Moonwatch is. It is a well-balanced watch for being both recognizable yet subtle. Let's say imagine there is this scale, one end with watches that only the watch enthusiast, or if you are really into watches to know, like say a Christopher Ward or H. Moser, where the other end are watches like a Richard Mille or say Patek 5711. The Moonwatch is right in the middle. It's the golden mean of watches, from brand image to wearability, to its price and availability. So, is it a watch for you? You tell me. It depends on what you're looking for, but my bet is it is likely that the Moonwatch has been in at least one of your considerations when thinking about making a watch purchase. Is it a perfect watch? No, there is no such thing as a perfect watch, but it is one that sits at the center of the industry. Like how the planets orbit around the sun. If I were to rename the Moonwatch, I would call it the Sunwatch. And on that bombshell, thank you so much for watching. Please like the video if you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Be sure to check out my other videos and subscribe to the channel for more content to come. I'll catch you on the next one.